I was not supposed to see that footage. It was almost midnight. The house was silent except for the hum of my laptop and the sound of my own breathing. I had been going through old neighborhood files for a completely different reason. Our next-door neighbors had upgraded their security system and sent over copies of old recordings after a break-in on the other side of the street. They thought one of the old clips might have caught a suspicious car that had been circling the block. I told them I would take a look. I was tired, numb, distracted. Then I saw her. A little girl in a pink dress stepped into frame. She was holding a man's hand. For 1 second my brain refused to understand what my eyes were seeing. I leaned closer to the screen. I blinked hard. I paused the video. Rewound it, played it again. The little girl turned her face just enough for the porch light to catch her profile. My heart stopped. It was Emma, my daughter. My daughter who had vanished from our front yard 5 years earlier. My daughter who had been declared legally dead after a year and a half of searching. My daughter whose memorial service I had somehow survived, even though it felt like I was being buried with her. There she was, alive, smiling. Walking hand in hand with my husband David into the house next door. I could not breathe. My hands started shaking so hard the laptop rattled against the kitchen table. My throat closed up. Every part of me wanted to reject what I was seeing, because accepting it meant something far worse than the nightmare I had spent 5 years trying to survive. If Emma was alive, then she had not been taken by some stranger. If Emma was alive, then someone had hidden her. If Emma was alive, then the person I had slept beside. Grieved beside. Trusted with every broken piece of me had lied to my face, while I drowned in the grief of losing our child. And that was only the first horror. Because when I kept watching the footage, I realized something even worse. She had never really left. Let me take you back. 5 years earlier, I thought I had the kind of life people quietly envy. David and I had been together since high school. He was the boy who passed me folded notes in chemistry class and waited outside my part-time job just to walk me home. We got married young. Not recklessly young. But young enough that people smiled at us with that look that said either this will last forever or it will burn out fast. It lasted, or at least I thought it did. By 25, we had bought our first house. It was not huge, but it felt perfect to us. White siding, blue shutters. A maple tree in the front yard. A swing on the porch that David built himself the first summer we moved in. On quiet evenings, we would sit there and talk about the future like it was a place we had already reserved. Then Emma was born, and for a while it felt like every prayer I had never said out loud had somehow been answered anyway. David was the kind of father people complimented in grocery stores. He changed diapers without being asked. He rocked her to sleep when she had fevers. He read bedtime stories in funny voices until she laughed so hard she hiccuped. On weekends, he would carry her on his shoulders around the yard, while she pointed at birds and clouds and airplanes like she had just discovered the whole sky. If there were cracks in our marriage, then I did not see them. Or maybe I saw them and named them stress, exhaustion, money worries. The ordinary storms that pass through every home. Next door lived the Hendersons. Helen and Robert Henderson had been in that house for 40 years. They were the sort of elderly couple everybody trusted instantly. She baked cookies. He fixed broken fence posts. They remembered birthdays and watered flowers when people went out of town. Helen had that grandmotherly softness that made children wander toward her without fear. Robert moved slower by then, but still had the habit of helping whenever anything needed fixing. They loved Emma, at least that is what I thought. Emma loved them too. Helen always kept coloring books in the living room. Robert whittled little wooden animals in his garage and gave them to her as prizes for being good. Looking back now, I can still see those moments so clearly that they make me sick. The small kindnesses, the easy smiles. The way evil can dress itself in ordinary neighborly warmth and never once look like a threat. The day Emma disappeared was bright and clear. One of those afternoons where the sunlight makes the whole world feel safe. I was planting flowers in the front garden. Emma was on the sidewalk with a bucket of chalk. She was drawing big crooked squares for hopscotch and narrating every second of it to me in the non-stop language of a 3-year-old. She kept talking about an imaginary friend named Lucy who apparently lived in the clouds and only came down when Emma wore pink. She was wearing her favorite pink dress that day. I remember that detail because I have replayed that day in my mind so many times that every color feels burned into me forever. I remember the smell of the dirt on my gloves. I remember the way a bee hovered near the petunias. I remember Emma laughing because she got chalk on both knees. I remember glancing at the kitchen window and thinking I had forgot my gardening gloves inside. I told her I would be right back. I stepped into the house. I was gone for maybe 30 seconds. Maybe less. When I came back out, the world had changed. The chalk lay scattered across the sidewalk like it had been dropped mid-game. The front yard was empty. Emma was gone. At first, I did not panic, because the human brain protects itself with denial. I assumed she had wandered behind the hedges, or around to the backyard. Or maybe to the Hendersons' porch, because Helen sometimes gave her juice boxes. I called her name, then louder than screaming, I checked behind the car. Behind the bushes, in the backyard. In the garage. I ran barefoot down the block shouting until my voice broke. David came home in a blur after I called him. The police arrived, then more police. Then neighbors, flashlights, questions. Search dogs. Helicopters. People talk about trauma like it is a single explosion. It is not. It is a long echo. The first night was panic. The second day was disbelief. The third day was when hope started becoming something sharp enough to cut you. The investigation consumed everything. Officers searched the nearby woods. They interviewed every registered offender within 50 miles. They pulled traffic camera footage. They knocked on doors until people stopped answering in robes and started answering in tears. Our house became a place of maps and coffee cups and whispered conversations in corners. The police questioned David more than once. They always do in cases like that. Parents. Spouses, close family. But he had an alibi that looked impossible to challenge. He had been at work. There were security cameras in the office. Coworkers saw him. Time-stamped emails, badge swipes, everything. So the case moved in another direction. A stranger, a drifter, a predator passing through, that was the story we were left with. And when no evidence led anywhere, the story hardened into the thing I hated most. A mystery. Months passed, then more months. Search efforts slowed. Volunteers disappeared. News crews moved on. Missing posters faded in the rain. David grieved in a way people admired, quietly, steadily. He held me through my breakdowns. He sat beside me at support groups. He told me every single day that none of this was my fault. He said it so often that eventually I started hearing those words, even when he did not say them. None of this was your fault. But guilt does not care about logic. Guilt is a parasite. It feeds on repetition, on stillness. On the exact same memory rewound thousands of times. If I had not gone inside. If I had grabbed the gloves earlier. If I had made her come with me. If I had watched her for one more second. Those thoughts hollowed me out from the inside. I quit my job because I could not focus long enough to answer emails without seeing the empty sidewalk in my mind. I stopped returning calls. Friends drifted away because grief makes other people uncomfortable when it lasts too long. My parents tried to help, but every visit ended with all of us crying. I slept with Emma's blanket for nearly a year because it still smelled faintly like the shampoo she used. I went to therapy, then more therapy. I took medication. I learned breathing exercises and grounding techniques and how to survive anniversaries. When the police finally told us they were reclassifying the case, and pursuing a legal declaration of death, I thought I might actually die in that office. 18 months. That was how long it took for the system to decide. There was almost no chance our daughter was alive. We held a memorial service. There was a tiny white urn at the front, even though it held no ashes. Just symbolism. Just emptiness with a ribbon tied around it. I wore black and listened to people say she was in a better place. I wanted to scream that her better place was supposed to be with me. After the service, I found David in Emma's room, sitting on the floor, holding one of her stuffed rabbits. He was crying so hard his shoulders shook. I sat beside him and believed every tear. I believed all of it. That was my life for 5 years, survival dressed up as living. Then one night, I opened the wrong video file and discovered that my daughter had been alive the whole time. Still on our street. Still within reach. Still close enough that, if I had stood in the right upstairs window at the right hour on the right day, I might have seen her shadow. I stared at the footage until my eyes burned. David walked up our driveway. He paused near the porch, looked toward the yard. Waited until I stepped inside the house, then he moved fast. He crossed the grass, scooped Emma up in one practiced motion, and carried her next door. She did not scream, she did not fight, she laughed, she thought it was a game. I do not know how long I sat frozen after that clip ended. Seconds maybe an hour, time had stopped meaning anything. Then I forced myself to keep watching. I told myself I needed to know everything. What I found next shattered whatever was left of me. There were more files. Dozens of them, weeks worth. Emma in the Hendersons' backyard, pushing dolls in a toy stroller. Emma eating pancakes at their kitchen table. Emma asleep in a small bed in what looked like their guest room. A night light glowing against the wall. New toys stacked neatly in bins. Emma alive, fed, bathed, comforted, hidden. My stomach turned so violently, I had to run to the sink. I thought I was going to throw up. The Hendersons were in it too, the sweet old couple who had hugged me while I sobbed on their porch. The people who brought casseroles during the first weeks after Emma vanished. The people who helped tape missing posters to telephone poles. All the while my daughter had been sleeping on the other side of their wall. I kept watching. David was in those videos constantly, every day after work. Some nights late, some mornings early. There he was at their kitchen table, helping Emma color. There he was carrying groceries into the house. There he was laughing while Helen handed Emma a bowl of strawberries. The three of them looked like a family. Not a kidnapping, not an emergency, a family, and I was the outsider, the ghost. The woman they had erased without telling her. My whole body went cold. I wanted to call the police right then. I wanted to run outside and tear that house apart with my bare hands. But something stopped me, maybe instinct, maybe fear. Maybe the knowledge that if I made one wrong move, after waiting 5 years, I could lose her again. So I watched longer. I watched until sunrise threatened the edges of the blinds. I watched until the laptop battery warning flashed. I watched until I found the clip that finally answered the question that had been screaming in my head from the moment I saw Emma. Why? The video was dated 2 weeks before Emma disappeared. The camera angle showed the Hendersons' kitchen. David sat at the table. Robert Henderson stood near the sink. Helen was pouring coffee. There was no audio, but the image quality was sharp enough to read faces and sharper still when David leaned forward. I could read lips well enough from years of subtitling old shows during sleepless nights. Not perfectly, but well enough. I watched that clip over and over. The divorce will destroy me financially. That was the first sentence I understood. Then another, if Emma is gone, Sarah will fall apart. Another. She will not fight for the house. Another, she will not ask for alimony. I stared at his mouth forming those words, and felt something inside me split open, so wide, I thought I might never close again. It was not about danger. It was not about protection. It was not about some delusion that he was saving Emma from me. It was money. He had been planning to leave me, and decided the cleanest way to do it was to steal our daughter and let me believe she was dead. 5 years of grief, 5 years of medication, 5 years of therapy. 2 suicide attempts. 5 years of blaming myself for 30 seconds in the kitchen. All of it because he wanted a cheaper divorce. I wish I could tell you that I screamed. I wish I could tell you that I smashed the laptop against the wall and ran straight to the police. But what actually happened was quieter and somehow more terrifying. I sat there in complete silence. My face felt numb. My hands went still, and a kind of cold clarity settled over me like ice forming on deep water. It was almost peaceful. The kind of peace that comes right before something irreversible. Because in that moment I understood 2 things. First, the man I married had spent 5 years watching me die in slow motion. Second, I could not afford a single mistake. I copied every file I could find onto a flash drive, then another. Then an external hard drive. I uploaded them to a secure cloud account I created under a new email address. I sent links to 2 separate accounts, only I could access. I photographed the screen with my phone as backup. I wrote down dates and times. File names, patterns, anything that looked important, then I drove, not to the police. Not yet. I drove 2 towns over and sat in a grocery store parking lot for almost 2 hours with the engine off and my head against the steering wheel. I cried until there were no tears left. Then the crying stopped and the rage took its place. Not loud rage, not reckless rage, focused rage, the kind that sharpens you. David had stolen 5 years from me. The Hendersons had watched me unravel and brought me food while my daughter slept a few feet away. They had not just hidden Emma, they had made me mourn her. They had turned my grief into theater and cast themselves as supporting mourners. And somewhere inside that fury another thought emerged. If they had done this once, then they would lie again. If I called too soon, and they panicked, then they could hide evidence. Move her, run, tell Emma some new story that made her fear me. I needed a plan. So I made one. The next week was the longest week of my life. I moved through the house like everything was normal. I smiled at David over breakfast. I nodded while he talked about work. I let him kiss my forehead before leaving each morning, and I did not flinch even though I wanted to scrub my skin raw after he touched me. At night, I pretended to sleep beside him, while my mind built timelines in the dark. I researched custody law, kidnapping statutes, evidence handling, emergency protective orders. I opened a new bank account and quietly transferred half our shared savings into it before he could freeze anything. I packed a bag and hid it in my trunk. Clothes, cash, Emma's old stuffed rabbit. My medication. Birth certificates, social security cards, everything I thought we might need if this turned into a sprint. Most importantly, I watched. I watched their routine from behind curtains and through the tiniest openings in my blinds. Every day around 3 in the afternoon, Helen let Emma into the backyard. Robert usually stayed inside. Helen sat in a lawn chair for a while, then often went in for her nap. David was still at work. There was a window, small, risky but real, and I waited. Waiting was the hardest part, because every minute I spent planning was another minute my daughter was still in that house. But I kept telling myself the same thing. One mistake and you lose her again. Friday came. 3:00. The sky was overcast and the air smelled like rain. Emma was in the backyard with a jump rope. Older now, taller, her hair longer. 8 years old instead of 3. 5 birthdays stolen from me standing in the grass, just on the other side of a fence. Helen went inside, I counted to 60, then another 60, then I climbed. The fence scraped my palms. My knees shook when I dropped into their yard. For one horrible second, I thought Emma might scream, because to her, I was a stranger from a half-forgotten past. Instead, she looked at me. Really looked at me. And her whole face changed. Mommy, that one word broke me harder than anything else had. She ran straight into my arms. She knew me. After 5 years of lies, and distance, and manipulation, she still knew me. I fell to my knees, holding her so tightly she squeaked and laughed, and cried all at once. I buried my face in her hair, and inhaled like I was learning how to breathe again. She smelled like sunshine and shampoo and childhood. She smelled like my daughter. She kept touching my face with both hands like she needed to make sure I was real. I could hardly see through my tears. I wanted to ask 1,000 questions right there. Did they hurt you? What did they tell you? Did you think I abandoned you? Did you miss me? But there was no time. So I pulled back just enough to look at her, and said the only thing I could. We are going on an adventure. She nodded immediately like she had been waiting for this, without knowing she was waiting. I lifted her, and climbed back over the fence with more strength than I knew I had. My heart was pounding so hard, I thought it might trigger every alarm in the neighborhood. I expected shouting at any second. A door slamming open, Helen screaming, Robert grabbing my arm, nothing. We reached the car. I buckled Emma into the back seat, with trembling hands, and drove straight to the police station. I do not remember a single red light on that drive. At the station, the desk sergeant looked annoyed when I rushed in because to him, I was just another panicked woman talking too fast. Then I said my name, then I said my daughter's name. Then I said she had been kidnapped 5 years ago and was in my car right now. Everything changed. Within minutes, we were in a secure room. Officers were calling supervisors. Someone brought Emma juice and crackers. Another officer took my laptop and flash drives. I kept expecting somebody to tell me this was impossible. That the footage was fake, that I was confused. That trauma had made me hallucinate the whole thing. Instead, the room kept getting fuller. Detectives, then federal agents. By the time the FBI arrived, Emma was coloring with a crayon someone found in a drawer, while 3 grown men stared at the footage with faces drained white. One of the agents asked if Emma would talk to a child specialist. She did. What she told them made the whole room go still. She said Daddy had taken her to the special house. She said Grandma Helen told her she had to stay quiet during the day. She said Mommy was sick and could not take care of her right now. Then later Mommy had gone away. Then later Mommy did not want to see her because Mommy was sad and angry. Children will build their whole reality out of whatever adults hand them. They had given her a prison made of stories, and she had tried to live inside it because she had no other choice. David was arrested at his office before sunset. The Hendersons were taken from their house in handcuffs. Police cars filled our street, news vans followed, neighbors stood in driveways in shock. People who had hugged me at the memorial. People who had brought flowers on the anniversary. People who had whispered prayers over casseroles and candlelight vigils. All of them watching as the truth walked out wearing handcuffs. Later I heard that one of David's coworkers filmed his arrest and posted it online before realizing what case it was connected to. The clip spread everywhere. He looked stunned, pale, frozen in the doorway of his office, while agents led him away. Good, for once I was glad he knew what helplessness felt like. The Hendersons tried to save themselves immediately. Helen claimed David had manipulated them. Robert claimed they only meant to help temporarily, and then it got out of control. Their lawyer tried to paint them as frightened old people trapped in a terrible situation. But the footage destroyed that defense. There was too much of it. Too many calm dinners. Too many birthday cakes. Too many shopping bags full of toys. Too many afternoons in the yard. Too many moments where they had every chance to stop and instead chose to continue. And then there were the casserole dishes. You want to know the detail that still makes me feel physically ill? During the first month after Emma disappeared, Helen brought food to my house 3 times a week. Chicken soup, lasagna, banana bread. She stood in my kitchen and hugged me while I cried into her shoulder. She rubbed my back and told me miracles happen every day. The prosecution used those visits to prove calculated psychological cruelty. I had to sit in court and look at photographs of the same woman comforting me, while another exhibit showed my daughter asleep in her guest room that very same night. That kind of evil is difficult to explain because it is not wild or obvious. It is tidy, patient, smiling. It wipes down counters and folds laundry and asks if you're eating enough. The criminal case took over a year. During that time, Emma and I began the long, painful work of becoming mother and daughter again in the open, instead of in the shadows where they had kept us. People imagine reunion as the end of a nightmare. It is not. It is the beginning of another kind of healing. Emma loved me instantly, but trust had to be rebuilt in all the places they had damaged. She had memories of me from when she was very small, but they were tangled up with years of lies. Some nights, she woke up crying because she was afraid somebody would take her again. Some days she asked if Daddy was bad forever or only bad sometimes. Once she asked me if I had really not wanted to see her, and when I told her no. Never, not for one single second. She looked relieved in a way no child should ever need to look. We went to family therapy together, play therapy for her, trauma therapy for me. Joint sessions where we practiced telling the truth out loud in gentle, manageable pieces. I learned that healing with a child means measuring your words carefully enough to protect them without insulting their intelligence. Children always know more than adults wish they knew. They feel the shape of a lie, even when they do not understand the language. Emma started drawing again. At first her pictures were always houses. 2 houses side by side, one dark, one bright. Sometimes there was a little girl standing between them. Sometimes there was a fence. Sometimes there was a mother reaching over it. I kept every single drawing. Then came the sentencing. I had thought the trial was the hardest part. I was wrong. Sentencing was harder because by then there was no suspense about guilt. Only consequence. Only the cold task of assigning numbers to years and pretending numbers could measure what had been done to us. David sat at the defense table in a suit that no longer fit quite right. He looked smaller than I remembered. Not because prison had changed him yet, but because truth had. Exposure shrinks people. It strips away the version of them that charm once protected. He would not look at me. He would not look at Emma either. Coward. The judge spoke at length about premeditation. About emotional torture. About the exploitation of trust. About the unique brutality of allowing a parent to believe a child was dead, while that child remained alive and hidden nearby. Then the judge gave David 15 years for kidnapping and fraud-related charges. The Hendersons received 8 years each as accomplices. People later told me that was not enough. Maybe it was not. There is no sentence long enough for stolen childhood. For the funeral of a living child. For 5 years of grief manufactured for financial convenience. But then something happened that no one in that courtroom was prepared for. Emma asked to speak. The prosecutors had discussed it with specialists, carefully. Gently, no pressure. And Emma wanted to do it. She was 8 years old, tiny in that courtroom. She stood on the step stool they brought for her so she could reach the microphone. And she told the judge she missed her mommy every day. She said she used to look out the window and wonder if today would be the day I came back. She said Daddy told her I did not want to see her because it hurt me too much. Then she looked directly toward the defense table and said the words that shattered everyone in the room. I waited anyway. There was not a dry eye in that courtroom, not the judge, not the bailiff. Not even one of the reporters. Because in that simple sentence was the entire truth of what they had stolen and what they had failed to destroy. Hope they stole years, they stole birthdays. They stole bedtime stories and first days of school and scraped knees and loose teeth and Sunday pancakes. But they did not kill her hope that I loved her. And somehow that made their cruelty feel even more monstrous, and my daughter's heart feel even more miraculous. After sentencing, we left that town. There was nothing there for us anymore, except ghosts and headlines, and a front yard I never wanted to see again. We moved across the country. New school, new therapist, new pediatrician. New house with no neighboring fences, close enough to cast shadows over us. We painted Emma's room yellow because she said it looked like morning. We planted flowers together in the front garden, and when I went inside for anything she came with me. Every time, no exceptions. The civil case ended later with a settlement that ensured David would never benefit from what he had done. Assets frozen, retirement accounts gutted, property sold, insurance battles fought. Every last respectable piece of the life he had built crumbled under the weight of the truth. Part of that money went into Emma's future: college, therapy, safety, stability. The rest could never buy back time. People sometimes ask whether I hate him. That is a difficult question, because hate is too simple a word for something this deep. I hate what he did. I hate the version of him that must have existed long before I ever discovered it. I hate every night I spent begging the universe to let me die, so I would not have to wake up without my daughter. I hate that I missed her learning to read. I hate that somebody else heard about her first loose tooth before I did. I hate that she had to be brave in ways no child should. But hatred is heavy, and Emma deserves a mother with both hands free. So I put it down as often as I can, not because he deserves forgiveness, he does not. But because Emma deserves peace. Still, there are moments when the rage returns without warning. A pink dress in a store window, a little girl drawing with chalk on a sidewalk. The smell of banana bread. A certain kind of late afternoon light. And on those days I have to remind myself where we are now. We are here, together. Alive, free. Sometimes at night, Emma asks me to tell her the story of how we found each other again. Not the courtroom part, not the lies, just the part where I climbed the fence and she ran into my arms. So I tell her. I tell her about the cloudy sky and the smell of rain and how brave she was, and how strong she held on to me. I tell her there was never a moment in all those years when I stopped loving her. I tell her if there had been oceans or mountains or locked doors between us, I still would have come. And every time I finish, she says the same thing. I knew you would. That is what hits me the hardest now, not the betrayal. Not even the lost time. It is the faith of a child who had every reason to doubt, and somehow did not. That faith saved me too, because there were years when I was not sure I wanted to keep living. Years when grief convinced me I was already gone. Years when I believed the last meaningful chapter of my life had ended on a sidewalk, beside a box of broken chalk. But it had not ended. It was only hidden. Buried under lies, waiting. Truth is strange that way. People think it arrives like thunder, loud and immediate and undeniable. Sometimes it does. But sometimes it waits in silence on an old hard drive, until one exhausted woman opens the wrong file at the right moment, and her whole world tears open. If I had not checked those videos that night, then maybe they would have kept Emma longer. Maybe forever. That thought still chills me, because evil does not always need brilliance to win. Sometimes it only needs everyone else to stop looking. So I keep telling this story, for Emma, for the version of me who almost did not survive those 5 years. For every parent carrying a grief so heavy it changes the shape of their life. For every person who has been lied to so completely that trusting their own memory feels impossible. And for anyone who needs to hear this. If something feels wrong, then keep looking. If the story does not fit, then keep asking. If your gut is screaming in the quiet, then do not ignore it just because someone else wears a kind face. Monsters do not always look like monsters. Sometimes they live next door. Sometimes they bring food. Sometimes they sleep in your bed and kiss your forehead and tell you everything will be okay, while they are the reason your life is burning down. But truth leaves traces. And one day, if you keep going and keep looking and keep breathing through the worst of it, you may find the thread that unravels the whole lie. I did, and when I did, I got my daughter back. Not the lost years. Those are gone forever, not the innocence. That was taken from both of us. But I got her back. I got to hear her laugh again, real laugh, belly laugh. The kind that fills a room and makes the dark back up a little. I got to braid her hair for school. I got to learn her favorite songs. I got to watch her outgrow shoes and spelling lists, and the first set of fears they planted in her. I got to become her mother again, not in memory, but in real ordinary daily life. There is no victory pure enough to erase the cost. But there is still victory, and sometimes that has to be enough. So if you are listening to this, while holding on to your own heartbreak, your own unanswered questions, your own private war against the thing that broke your life, please hear me. Do not give up too early. Do not let silence convince you there is no truth. Do not let grief tell you the story is over when you are still here breathing. Sometimes the ending you get is not the ending you planned. Sometimes it is harsher, stranger, more scarred. But sometimes against every odd and every nightmare and every lie, it still gives you one impossible gift. A second chance. I got mine in a backyard over a fence under a gray sky when my little girl looked at me and said, "Mommy." And no matter what was stolen from us before that moment, no one will ever take that word from me again. If this story hit you in the heart, then do not just watch and move on. Subscribe to the channel right now, because stories like this matter, and the next one might stay with you just as deeply. Like this video if you believe truth always finds a way to surface. And in the comments, tell me the one moment in this story that hit you the hardest, or tell me what you would have done if you were in my place. I read your comments, and they mean more than you know. And if you have ever survived betrayal, grief, loss, or the kind of darkness that makes it hard to keep going, then let your voice be heard below. You are not as alone as pain wants you to believe. Until the next story, stay safe. Stay aware, and never ignore what your soul is trying to tell you.